kind of just a sitting or waiting area prior to services, or if that arrangement conference room is being used, we've met with folks in here. So a lot of times families can come in here and just gather. Once again, as we mentioned then, since we're back in the chapel, if anybody has any questions for myself, anything we've gone through? Yes, sir.
I was wondering about those tools in the prep room on the wall. What are they and what are they used for?
Basically, there are there's scissors. There's a lot of scissors. Anywhere from any small scissors that we may need to use for cosmetic purposes, trimming of eyebrows, ear hair, nose hair, mustache, things like that. There are scissors for a lot of times if people bring clothing in that it may not fit a loved one, whether they've lost weight, whether they've gained weight, if we need to make any alterations or kind of do any creative tailoring, cutting the sleeves, cutting a back of a jacket or a blouse in order to get those to fit. Some of the other tools that were in there, basically hanging up, were you may have seen it kind of looked like a power tool, almost kind of like a drill. What that is for when the body is brought in and ready for embalming, we do what is called setting the features, which is basically making sure that person looks right. We're creating the smile or natural expression on the face. Part of doing that is when the death occurs, rigor mortis is a process of the body stiffening, sets in, but then it also sets out once again, creating a looseness. So to help us achieve the jaw not dropping wide open, there are two barbs that are injected, barbs with a needle barb with a wire that are injected into the sides of the gums, and basically that jaw is wired shut so that the mouth does not drop open. So those are kind of the uses for those tools that were in there. Okay, any others?
What type of embalming fluid is used and where does it go?
The embalming fluids that we use, there are several different types. Some of them are for coloring. When, say for example, a Caucasian person, your cheeks get red, your earlobes get red, nose gets red. All that is from your blood vessels and circulation. So when the blood is drained, it's going to be just a pasty white. So some of that colorization, there are dyes and different chemicals to create that pinkness or that hue that they may have. There's just kind of a basic formula, if you will. There are tints, colors. Somebody who may have been very tan. There are different chemicals that we'll use on African American and Hispanic bodies. Because if we use a particular chemical, say for example on an African American body, that may dry that body out way too fast. We need to make sure there's a moisture content because of the skin capabilities and makeup. Basically, as I mentioned back in the olden days, those solutions were made of 90% formaldehyde, which would just cause an instant dehydration within a few days. Now chemicals and things are put in there, and the formaldehyde level for the hazard content of that has dropped and been replaced with other chemicals. So there's a difference of the dyes, the moisture content, so there's really several different types of chemicals that are used. Basically, as you ask where it goes, is we're replacing that blood in that body in the venous system with those chemicals. The blood is forced then out down to the drain into a receptacle, and then basically flushed down into a treatment system. It's not going into your basic water or waste system, but it goes through a treatment system, just as dry cleaning solutions and some hair salons may have a sanitary septic system. Any others? Yeah. Oh, whoever, you guys flip for it.
Is the cemetery just a memorial park?
Our cemetery primarily is. A memorial park, what that is a difference of a traditional type cemetery with upright markers. A memorial park cemetery is one that allows for flat markers. Vases that cannot be upright. They can be upright, but they have to be those that have a chain that can be put back into the ground. Basically, that's a purpose for maintaining the cemetery grounds, trimming, and for time frames so that cemetery maintains the beautiful natural look. We do, though, allow, and we've opened a garden 2 years ago that are for upright garden, for upright headstones. But ours is primarily a memorial park cemetery so that we can mow over those grounds. Anything else? Yeah. Oh, that's right. You had a question.
How cold do you keep that 3-tier refrigeration unit? And then how many deceased can you fit in there?
We have a bottom rack, middle rack, top rack, and it's generally about 42 degrees. Of course, all the science people here, 32 is going to be freezing, so we try to keep it just above that. We don't want, especially if something would happen where the family chooses, say for example, cremation, or there was an accident, we had to hold the remains not knowing what the family chose, we would hold those remains in the refrigeration unit, and if they came back the next day and said, well, you know what, our grandson's flying in from Las Vegas, he's not going to be here for a day or two, but we want to see him before you cremate. We want to be able to bring that person's remains out and not have that person be frozen. Or if they choose embalming after thinking about it, it's very difficult to embalm those cold, frigid remains, and then without having to lack of a better word, have the body thaw out. We want a temperature that's going to slow down that decomposition, but not yet freeze the remains. Okay.
How much does the hearse cost?
Most of those funeral cars are all fabricated, especially the funeral coach. What basically they do is they take the front of a usual Lincoln or Cadillac 5-passenger car, basically split it down the middle, and then the back ends of those coaches are all fabricated, generally fiberglass and other materials. And it's a pretty neat process to see one being built. But generally, by the time you'd get a newer coach, you're looking at around $80,000 for a funeral coach. Yeah, so we just had one that was wrecked, bottom corner, small. I mean, you could have used black duct tape or something, but it was $25,000 just to repair it for just a ding. So all that fiberglass and fabricated work, those cars are pretty high dollar. Any others? The tall kid in the back.
Have you ever buried anybody anything except a casket? And what's the most unique request you've had for a funeral home or a funeral service?
We have had some requests for more like the green burials and things, and so people have made their own caskets. We've had a couple fellows that have made their own casket, kept it in a storage unit, there's a garage or whatever, and brought them in. We've used some cardboard containers, the family's request. The state of Kansas says as long as it's a rigid container, then they can be buried. I don't know if we're going to have time for any of the strangest requests. There's so many. I mean, we've had people bring their pets in. They want Fido, love Dad, and the dog's got to be at the funeral. So the dog sat right up here with the widow during the whole funeral. We've had there was a fella he was a big motorcycle guy, had a couple of different Harleys. Wanted to be cremated. They couldn't ever find an urn that they fit. It just, you don't have anything. We looked online. We can't find anything. The son wanted to bring in a gas tank that he painted for his dad. I said, why don't you use that for the urn? So he welded up the bottom, opened up the top where the gas goes in, and we put the ashes in there. We used a gas tank off one of his old bikes for the urn. My word, I mean, really, there's just... there were a time that they wanted the kids and grandkids to have magic markers, Sharpies, and write on. Grandpa had like a silver casket. They'd seen where people had written notes to Grandpa and put it in the casket with them, but they wanted everybody to see these notes. So the grandkids drew pictures and put stickers and everything on the casket. They wrote messages, and so, like I said, we really try to accommodate everything that we can for folks. So there's not such a thing as a strange funeral, because we've seen and done pretty much everything. So, anything?
I remember several years ago, director talking to me about being in the prep room and somebody not being viewable, so to speak. But there had to be a sense of closure between that and a family member. So he just arranged it so that the sheet just exposed the hand and that person sat there for an hour, 2 hours, just holding on to that person's hand. Have there been many instances where viewing wasn't appropriate and where you had instructed the family so?
Our goal, and my goal, is always that if somebody wants a viewing, we allow it. I don't think it's my place to tell somebody, no, you shouldn't see him or her. We try to base that on what we think. In seeing somebody, a lot of times you'll see an officer or somebody say it was a car wreck, and you're never going to be able to see them. But that officer may not know what we do and what we can or cannot do. So if we're able to get their loved one back, we'll be able to state to those folks, yes, you can have a viewing. Or, you know what, I'm not going to tell you no, but it may be best not to. There have been a couple circumstances where there just wasn't anything that we could do. A couple things that I have done in the past similar to that is to give those people privacy in the viewing room, whereas maybe we're able just to close the caskets open from either the top or bottom. If you've gone to a service and you've gone to a viewing or something, that top half is open. You see that top half of that person. I've done it in the past where we have to close that top half, and just as you said, if somebody needs to hold that person's hand, touch their leg, whatever the case is, then they're able to do so. We want to accommodate that. But it's very difficult. You've got to make that decision with those people and how they're going to react to... Our goal is to have that be that final picture that they have in their mind of that person. Whether or not they were in a nursing home after a long illness and we were able to make them look 2, 3, 4 years younger and have a nice visualization of that person rather than what they saw in the nursing home. Accidents, things like that, where there's so much trauma and there's swelling and things like that you just can't accommodate, you need to sit down and just talk to that person and say, you know what, this may not be the Joe that you want to remember. We'll allow you that opportunity, but you may not want that to be your last image. So there's a very fine line with trauma like that. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. I think, Charles, if you have anything else to wrap up with the class, then I thank you all for coming today.